welcome. This is something new for us. This is our thoughts on our podcast. So we are talking about Jamie Wheal's podcast, Finding Flow. So that's episode 35. And it's the start for us of something new and a new way of doing things. We had this trip to America where we were on the hunt for the flow state, and Jamie Wheal, who's the founder of the Flow Genome Project, as some of you will already know, he was the last podcast in that 2-week trip, and there were so many interconnected thoughts and ideas from all of the people that we saw on that trip and who we've seen previously that we felt we weren't necessarily doing justice to the podcast, to the conversations, and finding routes through. So we created these spider diagrams, which you can see on the Jamie Wheal podcast page on our website. So if you go to weMove.world and podcast, the Jamie Wheal one, there'll be a spider diagram there of the key topics that he raises and all the offshoots, and then how we see them connecting. So that's how we're going to put out ideas, and the purpose of these little podcasts is really just to give our thoughts and maybe thoughts to give you thoughts on the flow state and where it's all going. So we came up with 4 main topics from the podcast. Obviously started off with flow states, but it led to this idea of rites of passage and how rites of passages have been forgotten or neglected or abused or cheapened. And that led on to this idea of the ego and how these incredible states that we can get ourselves into in a positive states often lead to a battle of the ego, and actually where we should be is not often where we end up. And then quite a fun part that I found was how Jamie Wheal talked about the ideas of death and rebirth and how we need to die as often as you can. So they were the 4 main topics, and then it spins off from there. We're just going to pick a few things that were interesting to us.
Yeah, I mean, I thought what was interesting about this podcast was we were in America for 2 weeks. We were collating content for issue 3. Issue 3 was going to be on flow. Jamie was kind of the jewel in the crown with respect to going to do a bunch of podcasts and collate content for that. Obviously, having written Stealing Fire, and Jamie's co-author on that book, Stephen Kotler, writing Rise of the Superman, which is also about the flow states. And so we kind of, as it so happened, Jamie was the last one of the 2-week trip, literally the day or 2 before we flew out. And I think we both went there having read Stealing Fire, having our own understanding of flow states, our own experiences of flow states, and then having read Stealing Fire, and that bring up some thoughts that were maybe, well, it was an interesting experience reading Stealing Fire for me, because I would read a chapter and I'd have these thoughts and be like, yeah, but why has he not talked about this? And then you get to the next chapter and that's what he'd be talking about. And for me, really, that was about the opposite experience of, not the opposite experience, but flow being termed this amazingly positive state that everyone wants to get into, from tech entrepreneurs to extreme sports people. But maybe it's my mind, but I kept seeing like the negative side of things, like, but what about this? But what about this? And so going to see Jamie, I guess we kind of had a bit of a loaded mind as to how the conversation would go, and then getting there and actually having the conversation and coming away. I remember getting in the car and saying to you, like, that was so strange. Yeah. Like, I'm not sure what we got, but Jamie's mind is also so quick with his connections that it, coming away and listening to the podcast probably throughout the 10th or 11th time now recently, just seeing all these amazing connections that he was talking about, but maybe not quite getting that in the moment, for me anyway.
Yeah, I felt we were expecting almost to have the high of a flow state after speaking to him.
Yeah.
And it was probably a lot deeper than we thought, although I felt it was going to be an interesting podcast when the first thing he said was, I'm kind of, ask me some decent questions because I'm bored of talking about flow states because it's kind of gone way beyond that, and it felt like something could.
Well, I think
interesting could be there.
I think what was also amazing was there was so many connections with different areas that we've both experienced and both been interested in and working at over the past couple of years that we weren't expecting. So balancing the masculine and the feminine, psychedelics, the magic of the ordinary, visual acuity, burnouts, extraordinary experiences, death and rebirth, all these areas that I wasn't necessarily thinking that were connecting into flow state.
Yeah.
But of course, that's kind of thinking of flow in isolation, and it doesn't really exist in isolation at all.
No, it doesn't. Along with that, when we started, we always had this strapline of weMove to feel alive, and always felt there was another reason of why we're doing what we're doing. Why do people go to yoga? Why are people going to
I'm laughing because I think I know what you're about to say.
Oh,
weMove to die.
Well, weMove to die, but I felt that he was starting to answer the question that we'd often come back to. It's like, yeah, but why can't you do all this? And he also said during the podcast in response to you, I think you said like almost why do it? And he said for lots of people they can take that on as apathy's great.
Yes.
And just give up and don't really do anything.
Yeah. So what I said, I remember using the word negative because that's what he highlighted, but it was something to the tune of, well, you just got to focus on the everyday.
Yeah.
And, forget about all these highs and just get on with like sort of focus on the everyday. I guess the way I termed it was quite blasé, and he picked up on it. And that's why he was saying, well, yes, I understand what you're saying, but the way that you're saying it makes it sound very apathetic.
Yeah. Although I feel that that's the way that it's an easy way out for people.
Bypassing.
Because actually, when we picked up on him talking about anthropos and this idea of the fully formed human, you kind of, one is always working towards that, but you have to actually work towards it. You can't just be, well, I was born, therefore I'm a complete human. It's like,
I think
there's more to it.
Yeah, and I think it comes with like how you approach the activities that you do. You can wash your car, or you can really wash your car. You can live life, or you can really live life.
Yeah.
And I mean that in the ordinary sense.
That doesn't mean you have to do radical things all the time.
No. So I said to Jamie, so what is it that you do? And he said, he quoted the Abe Lincoln quote that said, I care not a whit for a religion unless his dog is the better for it. And he said, for me, the first, the second, the third, the 10th, the 50th, the 100th thing is, do I love my wife and kids, or am I loving my wife and kids enough? And am I devoted to them? Now there's having a wife and kids and living with wife and kids, and there's having a wife and kids and really loving them and giving them your full attention and that being your life. It's the same thing, but it's two radically different things.
Yeah.
And this is what he was saying about.
So all the experiences he has, because he does some fairly radical things, he's very into his action sports, they're the parts that allow him to really embrace what feels like the most ordinary, easy thing, having a relationship, having a family.
Yes.
But he has that counterbalance, so he can go and experience all these highs and the lows out there and come back and have his ordinary highs. Yeah. Which is, wow, we've got an amazing family, and they
reminds me of Jules Fairmean in issue 1 with a micro adventure. The tagline of that feature, based around a conversation that I had with him at the top of the mountain, was I go out to come back. And it took him going out, suffering frostbite, losing some of his toes, to realize that, actually he goes out to experience it to bring this back. And Ron Kalk, there's a podcast came up in a few weeks. Ron Kalk, the legendary climber of Yosemite Valley, or one of them, talked in reference to, why do these climbs unless you're coming back and sharing the experiences and sharing what you've learned of these climbs with other people. So in a way it progresses them, but in a way it's like, not everyone has to jump off the edge.
Yeah, you don't have to. Well, we're all at different levels, aren't we?
Yeah, precisely, yeah.
And that's probably that was the part that I came back from America most that was the most prominent idea in my head that we seem to only celebrate these people that are at the extremes of something.
Yeah.
So obviously the Alex Honnold free solo film came out, which is is an amazing film, an incredible feat, having just stood at the base of that thing and seeing that. But we can live equally incredible lives if we just go and live them.
Yeah, and so to that point, Jamie quoted Osho. If you don't know Osho, go check him out. His philosophies and theories are pretty extraordinary. He said, Osho said, extraordinary is not the point. The point is to become utterly ordinary, and to be utterly ordinary is the most extraordinary thing you can do. Yeah, I mean, that's really powerful. And he followed that up a bit later on, saying, do the basics: music, mountains, marriage, mushrooms. And if you're not playing in those spaces, you're missing out. You're falling behind the evolutionary curve.
Yeah.
Mountains, nature, marriage, love. Mushrooms, he talked about that with reference to sacred dietas or diets. And music as a way to get into those flow states. And they're all, and actually music, you go back to ritual drumming, within indigenous cultures.
Yeah. They're kind of there, or they're all there to lose your mind, aren't they? To get out of your mind and get back into being yourself. And I think now coming back, I always ask myself, kind of when we're training or when we're doing anything, it's like, why am I actually doing this?
Yeah.
And
really
some
pertinent
of the
question.
Some of
because half the time you'll be like, why the hell am I doing it?
Yeah. Well, some of my responses have been pretty, not because it's all fun and amazing and I want to do this. It's like actually quite the opposite. But knowing I need to be in that space to go through it. And we're not talking super hardcore workouts. It's like, some days people don't even want to get out of bed.
Yeah.
But you kind of have to experience those things and not numb over them or sort of blow them out so much that you can't experience anything else.
Right. And so I think that addresses a really important point that, and this was one of the points I had with regards to reading Stealing Fire and flow states, which was you can't be in flow all the time.
Yeah.
You just can't, because then if you're in flow all the time, then you're completely distracted from everyday life, which is, again, to go back to, living the most extraordinary thing is to live an utterly ordinary life. And, that means that you can't distract yourself all the time, because there's always going to be some time that you're going to, from all the stuff that you've got going on that you don't want to face. Yeah. Be that your fears or your relationships or your career or, your diet or your physical health. It's, flow's great, but you can't use flow just to distract you from that all the time.
Well, that's something that's come up for us a few times with people who we've met, and they're constantly in that. It feels like they're actually not in flow. They're chasing getting into flow all the time. Yeah. Which on the outside looks like, oh my God, they're amazing. They're doing all of this stuff all the time. But just taking a step back, it's really exhausting. Yeah. And you're like, why are you doing all of this stuff? Like, what have you got to prove? Yeah. What's really in there? Yeah. And it feels often, and this is kind of my experiences of it, you end up getting yourself you're almost in fight or flight, chasing through willpower and just pushing. Sheer grind and just pushing. Yeah. And you either fall off the edge of a cliff or you become a not very nice person. Or the worst thing, you become both. Yeah. And you've no idea. You kind of feel so lost in that world but you have to work super hard and grind to find this state. Yeah. Well, and then Jamie made a point about like the most fearless watermen are just super mellow. Yeah. Like it's like they'll hang out at home. Obviously when there's a big wave, then they're out and they're having that death and rebirth experience. Yeah. Which talks about anthropos. So for those who don't know what anthropos was, and it was certainly a new term to me, when we had that podcast, it's an ancient Greek philosophy of becoming a complete human. So not
not developing one aspect of yourself at the expense of another. So let's say mind, body and soul. You're not just physically strong, but mentally you're all over the place, or spiritually all over the place, or you're not just an incredible intellect and you're physically weak. It's about developing all three in sync with each other. So you're ready. It's really about developing so you're ready to
experience the richness of life, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think we're seeing that also with more coaches now, like physical coaches. They're the ones that we're gravitating towards. They all have a philosophical side. They all seem to be evolving there, and some maybe you then play catch up, or they're finding spiritual practices. And I think that's
it's looking at life on a deeper level, isn't it? On the surface, you're a coach. Let's say on the surface that person's a coach.
More than reps and sets.
Yeah, and that's what they do to make their living, and that's great. That's what allows them to survive in the world, the Western world that we live in, for example. Making money, paying bills, etc. But actually, it's just the front to be able to do the work that they want to do. So the great example of that is, we talk about him all the time, is Logan. He owns Juice Gym. There's 3 of them. He certainly seems to be crushing the gym entrepreneur world. But when you get to know him, the deep level of work he's doing for self-mastery, I would term it, actually, getting into his fears, seeing what his patterns and his stories are. The gym business just facilitates almost him being able to do all this deep work on himself as a person. And then you're looking at it, you're looking at life as opposed to life as a career. Like, this is what I do.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do? It's like, well, it's a big long story, because one aspect is that I have a gym. The other is that I spend countless hours with a therapist or a development coach. Another is that I'm going into these fears and I'm doing these, et cetera, et cetera. It's becoming that complete human.
Yeah. I wonder if you have to put yourself in those places to then come out and realize, and I feel like I've answered my own question, what you then have to work on. Like, you go and train and you go and lift weights, and then it exposes a weakness, and you're like, that's what I need to work on. I'm weak on this. And then it sort of, they're the easy ones you can pick off, and you can feel good about the numbers. And then often people will shy away from, like, I don't do cardio. It's like, well, that will be a real weakness if you ever got tested. But then we're going into a deeper thing with the mental health and the burnout and the results of just trying to push all the time and increase everything.
Well, then
you have to experience that to go, oh, actually I need to work on this. So that flow state, psychedelic experiences can bring to the surface a bunch of stuff that you don't actually want to know about yourself yet. You've been shown it. So you have 2 options. You either deal with it or you suppress it. And suppress it will lead to... that's the tipping of the ego, and you just...
and Jamie says that. He says, here's another quote, we're pretty good at big-ass blowout experiences. What we're really crap at is the Sabbath experiences, the micro experiences, the once a week, once a month episodes. And it's... I've been there. My own experiences going to the jungle in South America and having these ginormous experiences and coming back, and it hasn't made a fucking difference to who I am. And it's like, okay, so what was the point in going to have that experience where these visions were showing you these things and highlighting elements of your life, but you're still coming back and not changing? If you're not changing as a result of these things, then you have to question why you're doing these things.
And then repeatedly going back in and doing them.
Yeah, and this, this has become my personal problem with psychedelics, and it's actually really nice to hear Jamie talk about it, where, I know of people that are doing, ceremonies every week or every 2 weeks, or, consistently and constantly, and it's like ferociously, and it's like, why are you doing these? It's a tool, like all the other things you just mentioned. Meditation is a tool. Like, why are you doing these things? If you have that psychedelic experience and that vision, and it shows you this, and you don't come back and change it, then it should almost be like, you are not, like, psychedelics has a consciousness that says, you are not allowed to come and do me again until you deal with this issue. And if you haven't dealt with it, then I don't come out to play. And he talked about that with the gatekeepers of these things, and he talked about that with reference to the Burning Man community, which is not to single out Burning Man, but people are just want to get high.
Yeah.
Which
because
you know what?
It's so
Who can
fun.
blame them? It's great fun. Yeah.
Yeah. And Jamie does that. He says it's
This one.
oh well, it's that everybody is looking to cut the corners, and it'll clearly create more suffering. But then the one about it's mind-bendingly, neck-snappingly fun, and it really is.
Yeah. But then he also says, but it's Odysseus in the land of the lotus flowers, where you're completely distracted, and all of his men in that fable are completely distracted until Odysseus has like a wait, like what is
Why
it?
are we here?
What is it I've come to do? And I've got to get home to my. Ironically, or not ironically, of course not ironically, I've got to get home to my wife and kids.
Yeah.
To the ordinary life, to celebrate that life, to be in that life, to live it to its fullest, to get to the end of it and be like, I did good things.
And that's what comes into my head when you say that, is like this fitness boom and this movement boom, and people, you almost run to those things as a way of escaping the ordinary.
Yeah.
And then you kind of like, well, why are you at the gym all the time?
Yeah.
And why are you putting yourself through? And I had this conversation with Andy a couple of times. This idea that everything you do should leave you more energized when you leave than when you started. But people like to blow out, blow up, and then consider that a great thing, rather than leaving going, I feel, consequently everything after that becomes better because you're in that level, rather than this punishment and hiding, as opposed to celebration. And
I have a great example for this. That's us. Like when we're away on these trips, I always catch myself thinking, oh fuck, there's only 7 days left. Oh, there's only 6 days left. Having such a good time doing it and being really like, I don't ever want this to end. I just want to keep collating the information, doing these stories and features and whatever. And of course, the trip's going to end.
Yeah.
The trip. And, you got to get back and put all these different things that we found into our lives and share it with other people. So, if they want to, they can put it into their life. So that's the purpose.
Well, when we came back, we didn't really speak. And normally we speak most days, a few times a day. Yeah. Because we live in separate cities. But we didn't really, it just felt like we had 2 months, like
deep
2
downloading.
Weeks, deep downloading.
I could even work.
Yeah.
I couldn't even listen to the podcasts that we'd recorded. It was just too much. It was like an upload.
Yeah. And it would have been easy to go in there and work yourself up, must write this, must do all of this.
Well, we're sat in the middle of February, and the idea was to put these out at the beginning of January. Yeah. But it was still, it's like the ticker on a computer, and it's downloading from WeTransfer, and it's like 5 minutes left, 4 minutes left, 3. Yeah, and it's just continuing to download. Yeah. I've listened to, you've probably listened to this podcast more than me, and I've listened to it about 10 times. Yeah.
I think that when you get to that state and you're applying it to how you train and then how you work, and what also these podcasts that we've done is what they mean for weMove and why we're here and what's the point of putting it out. And the trips are one part, but actually it's to bring this information, to share it to more people, to know that if it's the same for us, which has been, we've always met these people at the time that we've needed to give clarity on certain things that we're going through, and as a resource to refer back to when we're going through something else. You're like, oh wow, that's the purpose of it. And it's never been just to be a sports and fitness platform. And I think I said that earlier. There's kind of more to it, because sports and fitness is just a tool for one part of the mind, body, spirit, which is really the body, to raise its potential on what it can be. And then that set us off on and then we're constantly, feels like you have a high and then it comes not crashing down, but you're like, oh wow, no, but maybe with this, and then work through it. But know that we're always it's always moving forward. And
to that Zach Bush, phenomenal podcast, Rich Roll and Zach Bush from the beginning of January. Definitely listen to it. It's been so good. It's probably one of the best podcasts I've ever listened to. Maybe
Yeah.
only seconded by this Jamie Wheal one that we've done.
Yes. And thirded by next week's.
Yeah. Yeah. And he, so then falling down the rabbit hole of different podcasts that he's done. And, you know, he talked about, it depends on your views, and, you know, not here to kind of tell you what your views should be, but he talks about life being on purpose. You know, and like everything is on purpose. All that really tough stuff you're going through or that you've been through, it's like there's a purpose. You know, he related it to his own experiences of working in the cancer ward for 15 years and going, having all the dogma scenarios, or going through all this, the scenarios of the dogma type thinking, and this is how we do things around here. And that was ultimately what led him to his big breakthroughs within his own work. You know, I'm sure everyone can relate to that experience, whether it be with their own careers or relationships or what have you. Like, it, you know, he suggests, I would personally agree, that everything is on purpose. And, you know, and that's the opportunity to work through it.
Yeah, and then you don't need to chase.
Yeah, exactly.
Because everything that you're going to experience is there for a reason. And it starts to sound kind of super mumbo jumbo, but, you know, thank your body for what it can do when you're training. You know, be kind to your mind, have good thoughts, love and forgive everyone around you.
Yeah, or even just accept the thoughts that come in, you know.
Yeah.
Love your body and what you've got.
Yeah.
You know, the whole gratitude practice thing's been a real interesting one. I can't remember. I read an incredible book, Brené Brown, Daring Greatly.
Mm-hmm.
And she talked about, like, when all these negative thoughts come in, having the counter thought to that was a gratitude thought. I can't remember how she termed it now, but it's really quite extraordinary. You know, your mind goes off into this, like, this sucks, or, you know, this is going to happen, and then you catch it and you counter it with a gratitude thought about that process or what's going on, and it really reframes it.
Yeah.
You know?
The mind is wild. Obviously, you know, I was going through some crazy stuff last week, and like the idea of getting into the sea, and then we got into the sea today, and it felt like a very different experience.
Oh my God, it's so good.
Last week it was just all about
it's so
kind
tough.
of dealing with it, and not even that it's tough. It's like, I'm just going to go in there and you know, I'm not going to get cold because I'm stronger than the world and all of this stuff. And then this week, particularly today, and even yesterday, just going in with a really different mindset. And last week, I mean, the thoughts I was having, it's like the world was ending. And they just come and go, don't they? They come and go. I didn't really want to do any training, but I went there. Year one was a bit miserable. But then I could see how it's really easy to sit in those thoughts. On the opposite end of the scale, it's really easy to see why people just want to go and experience the highs all the time.
Well, you know, the one that we just said earlier on, the quote, you know, everybody's looking to cut the corners, and it clearly creates more suffering. Like, you can, you know, cut the corners and not deal with the shit that you have to deal with. It's coming up again and again and again until you deal with it.
Yeah, and it always seems to come out in a physical, well, just a degenerative way, whether it's physical or mental.
Yeah.
And that feels like it segues into next week's
podcast,
which is kind of, this felt like an introduction into where...
Well, we recorded 10 podcasts on this trip, didn't we?
Yeah.
And they definitively split into a group of 4 and a group of 6.
Yeah.
And so the 4, beginning with this one, Jamie Wheal, Tony Molina
of the Rewire Project, which is really about systemic health, movement, and, well, I think there's one question he said, which is, do you want to thrive or do you want to survive? Most people want to thrive, and he lays out a very compelling protocol for thriving, which ticks many boxes that seem to be in the zeitgeist at the moment: ice, movement, vision, neurology, breath work, adventure, movement. It's a really great one. That I think this one goes out there. Tony comes back in a way gives you the tools to build on that. And then the following 2, Arthur Joseph, the vocal awareness coach, which is how you communicate your story and purpose with the world, which is that was probably the most moving of all the podcasts for us, for both of us.
Yeah.
And then Ron Kauk, which feels like it was a reflection on a life well lived, doing what you love.
Well, it's just like sitting with an elder, wasn't it? And just being not schooled, because that would imply aggressive, but being gifted, like a lifetime's reflection and lifetime's wisdom, and, being
and
like,
gifting him the space just to riff.
Yeah. And we riffed.
We
riffed on day one for 6 hours, then we realised that we didn't get any of it. We should have been recording that.
So we did a shortened version for about an hour, an hour and a bit.
Yeah.
So that's how we're going to flow. And then following on a really contemporary examples of people living in this world, which is quite, which is fun for many people that we really, really respect. So that's weMove. We're kind of going along this idea of a complete human experience. And we said it, and we didn't really know why we said it, but we moved to feel alive. We knew it made us feel alive, but we didn't know why it makes us feel alive. And it feels like now, 2 years in, we're flowing this idea through, which is really exciting for us. So thank you for listening. Let us know what you think in comments and Instagram us. And everything's on YouTube now. So weMove World is our channel. And thank you.
Peace.